On this Monday night, Morocco's earthquake survivors left with nowhere to go and nowhere to turn. The harrowing escapes.
Every house here is broken.
And why not all international help is being accepted. Our Crystal Goomansingh is in the earthquake zone. Plane problems and political tension. How much longer will the Prime Minister be stuck in India? Some Calgary daycares at the center of that E. coli outbreak get ready to reopen.
We may be forced to just have them go back, which is terrifying.
The new worries about infections spreading between kids.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
In Morocco, searchers are doing all they can to find anyone alive in the thousands of collapsed buildings 3 days after a devastating earthquake. More than 2,600 people are known to have died. Good evening and thanks for joining us. The epicenter was in the high Atlas Mountains, about 72 kilometers from Marrakech, and help has not yet reached many remote villages. This drone footage from the Azadin Valley shows what the 6.8 magnitude quake did. Buildings made of mud and brick simply crumbled. These images taken after the quake show what rescuers are up against. Thousands of people are injured, many others unaccounted for, and accessing the villages is difficult. The first 72 hours after an earthquake are critical. After that, the survival rate drops significantly. Our Crystal Goomansingh is in Morocco, where even those who survived are facing an uncertain future.
Residents are pushing back, arguing with government inspectors telling them to leave their homes because they're unsafe. They want to know where they're supposed to go. In what looks more like a prison exercise yard than living accommodations, we meet newborn Yakut and her mum, Dunya Kuzkaz.
Of course, I need to go back home as soon as possible because she got sick with the wind and cold that hit her here in the street.
This is just one camp inside the labyrinth that is the Medina. With the help of our Moroccan translator Karim, we navigate the little alleys tucked away from all the tourists still visiting Marrakech and the eyes of the world. Homes here are more than 200 years old and made only of clay and rock. Many had been previously declared unfit, but are still rented out. This gives you a look inside one of the homes in this neighborhood. There's a big foundational crack right along the roof, but also the floor. You can see it is slumping in the middle. I'm being very careful and standing to the outside. But this is traditionally what you would see in this neighborhood. In this house, there are 10 people who live here, 2 different families, and it just gives you a sense of some of them may still be standing, but not necessarily safe. Next door is where Abdel Haq Hilmani used to live with his wife and 3 young children. Miraculously, they escaped the upper level with a little assistance.
This girl helped me to my boys. That's I go in. That's some persons. Thanks. Thank you very much.
He starts to cry as he tells us the story. Those who find themselves suddenly homeless are scared. Some have been offered spots in hostels, but they don't want to go. This mother of 3 says she wants to have a permanent safe home for her family and that all of the victims of the earthquake deserve that. Some of the hardest hit areas are remote villages high up in the Atlas Mountains. Marigha is a small village. Here, 5 women were killed. 1 was a teenager. A dozen residents greet us, eager to have someone witness their struggles. Hassan, his wife, and newborn daughter were sleeping Friday when the earthquake hit. He shows us his injuries from the roof collapsing on him. Luckily, the earthquake made an escape route.
There was a hole in the wall.
His home is barely standing. Locals have been on their own to dig and rescue each other and pull the dead from the rubble. With the destruction all around, they don't know if the government will help them rebuild or come check on them. Morocco is a constitutional monarchy in which the reclusive King Mohammed VI is widely believed to hold the reins of power. People are starting to question why the king or the government didn't accept offers to help earlier. Foreign search and rescue teams are now working high in the Atlas Mountains, but with disasters like these, We know that time is critical. Donna?
All right, Crystal Goomansingh in Marrakech, Morocco. Thanks. Helicopters have been dropping aid to survivors in some of Morocco's mountain villages. The earthquake made roads to them impassable. An urgent appeal for blood donations has been answered by hundreds of Moroccans doing what they can to help the injured. Survivors and volunteers say the need for help is enormous. Teams from 4 countries are on the ground, but Morocco hasn't approved any more assistance. As Redmond Shannon explains, coordinating aid is not always as simple as accepting every offer of help.
The desperate efforts to find survivors as the hours slip by. These firefighters from Spain and their dogs are helping local teams in Morocco despite the dwindling hope. There were no rescue groups when we arrived, says the team leader. The destruction is absolute. All the buildings have collapsed. Spain has sent almost 100 rescuers and 8 dogs. Teams have also arrived from Qatar, the United Arab Emirates and the UK. Despite the huge task, Morocco has not accepted all offers of help.
We're working with the American government.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly told Global News Ottawa is ready to help when asked. France and the EU likewise.
We have not received an activation request under the EU civil protection mechanism from Morocco.
It's not difficult to understand why a government might not want help from former colonial power, for example.
John Cameron is a professor of international development. He says governments need to carry out assessments before accepting all help, and that local knowledge and leadership is always preferable in the short term and the long term.
There's a whole movement towards what's usually referred to as the localization of humanitarian response, where the goal is to try and increase the capacity of local actors.
The non-government aid sector is less political.
The disaster's still happening.
Canadian Hassan Ghani Sheikh arrived Sunday. His NGO Islamic Relief says charity workers like him face little resistance getting on the ground. The needs they are there to fulfill are basic: food, water, clothing and shelter. That demand unlikely to go away, even as the rescue operations pivot to recovery and rebuilding in the coming days and weeks. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Also in North Africa, catastrophic flooding has hit Libya, and as many as 2,000 people there are feared dead. Entire neighborhoods are swamped in several coastal towns. A powerful storm dumped heavy rain that led to the collapse of 2 aging dams, and that released a swollen, fast-moving river which washed away at least 1 neighborhood. Thousands of people are unaccounted for. The government has declared a state of emergency. Schools and stores are closed, and a curfew is in place. In Turkey, rescuers have now pulled an American explorer out of a deep cave more than a week after he became seriously ill. Rescuers released video that shows Mark Dickey being hoisted through Turkey's 3rd deepest cave. The 40-year-old was more than 1,000 meters below the surface when he suffered gastrointestinal bleeding. More than 15 rescuers from Turkey and other countries have been working for days to extricate him. Canada's Prime Minister is still stranded in India. The plane that got Justin Trudeau and a delegation to the G20 summit remains grounded. If it can't be fixed quickly, he may be flown home on one of 2 military aircraft that have been deployed as backups. Touria Izri is covering this trip. Touria, what's going on?
Donna, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will take off Tuesday afternoon at the earliest, almost 2 days later than his scheduled departure. And that's only if his plane can be fixed. It's an extended stay in a place where Trudeau does not appear overly welcome. A technician flying commercial has left for Delhi to fix the broken part. The 36-year-old Polaris can't fly home without it. It's the latest issue with the problem-plagued Airbus, which aviation and defense experts insist should have been replaced years ago. A new plane was delivered at the end of August, but it's not ready to fly yet and is sitting on the tarmac in Ottawa. This debacle is adding another layer of difficulty on an already rocky trip. Trudeau was here for the G20, hosted by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The two have a strained relationship, which only seemed more strained at the summit. Trudeau has been attacked in Indian media, with headlines saying he was snubbed at the summit, with India only agreeing to a pull aside. The leaders had a brief sit-down behind closed doors, unlike some of our allies, which had more formal meetings. The tensions between Modi and Trudeau stem from a Sikh separatist movement in Canada and interference by India in Canadian affairs. This is another trip to India that has not gone according to plan for Trudeau, so it's no surprise the Canadian delegation is eager to leave. Trudeau is scheduled to attend the Liberal caucus in London, Ontario on Wednesday, but Donna, it's not clear if he'll make it on time.
All right, Touria Izri in Delhi, thanks. There are developments in Canada related to that Sikh separatist movement Touria mentioned. In Surrey, BC, tens of thousands of people turned out for a vote to weigh support for an independent Sikh nation in northern India. The vote for an independent Khalistan is not officially binding. It was held at a Gurdwara where its former president, a staunch supporter of the independence movement, was shot and killed in June. Votes are being held in several other countries, but not in India. Prosecutors are laying out the case against the man accused of intentionally killing 4 members of a Muslim family in London, Ontario. 22-year-old Nathaniel Veltman is charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count of attempted murder, as well as terror charges. He's accused of ramming his pickup truck into the family who was out for a Sunday walk. Global's Sean O'Shea is covering this trial in Windsor. Sean.
Donna, an emotional first day of this trial where 12 jurors and 2 alternates were told to carefully weigh the evidence. Family and friends of those who died listened as prosecutors outlined how a man who was 20 at the time, the defendant in this case, set out to carefully plan and then kill the victims simply because they were Muslim. He arrived here in a prisoner's van as police kept photographers from getting too close. Nathaniel Veltman was ushered into the highly guarded Windsor courthouse for a trial that's expected to last at least 2 months. The 22-year-old is facing 4 first-degree murder charges and 1 count of attempted murder. Prosecutors say what he did in June 2021 in London, Ontario was an act of terrorism.
Somebody would intentionally go out there to instill terror in their fellow Canadians is traumatic.
This is the textbook case, as sad as it is, for the very reason we have these terrorism enhancements or sections of our criminal code.
In her opening address, the Crown alleged Veltman intentionally drove his recently bought Dodge Ram pickup truck into a Muslim family out for an evening walk, killing 4. 46-year-old Salman Azal, his 44-year-old wife Maida Solman, their 15-year-old daughter Yumna, and her 74-year-old grandmother Talat Afzal. The couple's 9-year-old son was seriously hurt but survived. Prosecutors say Veltman planned the attack 3 months in advance, alleging Veltman was a white nationalist inspired by others, including Branton Tarrant, convicted of killing 51 at mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2019. On the day of the London attack, the Crown says Veltman saw some Muslims on the street and concluded now's the time. They said Veltman said, "When I stepped on the pedal, it was surprisingly easy. I don't regret what I did by driving straight into the family. I want the world to know why I did it," blaming Canada's immigration policies. The Crown told the jury they'll hear audio recordings of Veltman's admissions. He wanted to inspire more young men, send the message to others that they can use a vehicle. Family and friends of the victims came to court. Some sobbed as the Crown laid out its case.
I think in terms of a message, it's really just that the Canadian public pay attention to what's happening here.
London's worst mass murder and a concern about what could happen to others in the future.
And today it's Muslims, and tomorrow it could be another group.
This is a high-profile, high-security case. We were searched twice at the courthouse, once going in and once outside the courtroom, where 4 heavily armed tactical officers stood watch. The judge in this case wants to make sure the trial goes safely. Donna.
Okay, Sean O'Shea in Windsor, Ontario. Thank you. The number of charges in the Toronto sexual assault case against Peter Nygard have been reduced from 11 to 6. Jury selection was set to begin today, but was postponed to next week. Nygard was originally facing 8 charges for sexual assault and 3 charges of forcible confinement. The case was adjourned until September 20th after the Crown told the judge 3 of the 8 original complainants are not expected to testify. The 82-year-old also faces charges in 2 other jurisdictions in Canada and 1 in the U.S. He was first arrested 3 years ago in Winnipeg under the Extradition Act on charges in New York that include sex trafficking and racketeering. It's expected he will be extradited to the U.S. after these Canadian cases are resolved. Contagion concerns coming up. Calgary's rising number of E. coli cases as daycares linked to the outbreak are cleared to reopen. In Calgary, some daycares connected to a huge E. coli outbreak are reopening, even though the source of the infection still has not been confirmed. There are now 231 lab-confirmed cases of E. coli, and 21 children have developed a serious blood and kidney condition. As most of the children recover, families have to decide whether to send them back to the place that made them sick. Heather Yurex-West reports.
It's been a difficult week for 3-year-old Alexander Zalm.
These kids are warriors and super brave for what they've gone through.
After becoming sick with E. coli at daycare, the preschooler had to endure daily blood tests, waiting hours in emergency every day. Doctors believe he's recovering, but Zalm believes his son spread the infection to a young family member as well.
You don't need a lot of bacteria in order to get sick. And what that means is that they can actually spread directly from person to person.
Shiga toxin-producing E. coli spreads among children within the same household 10% of the time. It's why numbers in this outbreak could still be on the rise. It's also why Alberta Health Services says anyone sick with the infection won't be able to return to daycare until they're completely well.
I want to stress that the health and safety of children and staff are our absolute top priority. Facilities will only reopen if we are confident that health and safety will not be affected.
But the source of the outbreak remains unknown. A central kitchen used by all the daycares only highly suspected to be the cause. On Sunday, nearly a week after the outbreak was declared, Alberta's premier sent out her thoughts and prayers while calling for a ministerial investigation. I've asked the Minister of Health and the Minister of Children and Family Services to do a full assessment to prevent this from happening in the future.
I would like to see an inquiry. I want to know why this happened. I want to know if we were to send our child back there or send our child to any other daycare facility, that this isn't going to happen again.
But with childcare options in short supply, families like the Zalms have few choices other than sending their kids back to the place where they first got sick. Heather Yurex-West, Global News, Calgary.
Black Sea breakthrough ahead, what Ukraine says it's taken back from Russia. The Ukrainian military claims it has regained control of the so-called Boyko Towers, 4 gas drilling platforms in the Black Sea. The rigs located between Crimea and Odessa had been seized by Russia in 2015 and were being used as helicopter landing sites and to position Russian long-range missile systems. The reported gain moves Ukraine one step closer to taking back Crimea. Ukraine's special forces say they also seized a stockpile of ammunition as well as valuable radar technology. There are reports North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is on his way by train to Russia for a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The Kremlin says Kim, who rarely travels abroad, will arrive in the coming days. Neither country is confirming where they'll meet or what's on the agenda. North Korea is one of the few countries to have openly supported Russia's war on Ukraine. It has ammunition stocks that could be traded for advanced technology and badly needed food aid. Historic tennis title next. A new duo builds on Canada's success with doubles. Lots of Canadian athletes are at the top of their game right now. Earlier this year, Nick Taylor became the first Canadian golfer to win the Canadian Open in 69 years. The men's national basketball team won its first medal at the FIBA World Cup. And now in tennis, Gabriela Dabrowski made history at the U.S. Open, becoming the first Canadian to win a women's doubles title at a Grand Slam. Eric Sorensen reports.
They were in search of new partners. Canada's Gabby Dabrowski and Aaron Rutliff, a New Zealander raised in Canada, only found each other this summer, but they clicked instantly. Dabrowski became the first Canadian women's Grand Slam doubles champion. An emotional Rutliff, grateful to her more experienced partner.
Even though we faced a lot of adversity in a lot of our matches, I think it's really cool what we've been able to do in a short span of time.
Canada has become an exceptional tennis nation. Bianca Andreescu's U.S. Open singles title, Leylah Fernandez, a finalist, and the men's team that won the Davis Cup just last year.
But it is in doubles that Canadians have sparkled most. Sébastien Leroux was the first Canadian to win a Grand Slam doubles title in 1999 at the U.S. Open. He and Daniel Nestor combined to win a gold medal at the 2000 Olympics. Nestor, one of the all-time greats, won a Golden Slam, Olympic title, and all 4 majors. Nestor has won 8 Grand Slam men's doubles championships, along with 4 mixed titles. And Gabby Dabrowski, 2 mixed titles and now the first women's doubles Grand Slam for this country.
I think there's just a history, and I think success begets success. And I think the breakthrough that we saw in singles kind of took Canadian tennis to another level, that we're seeing success both in singles and we're seeing it in doubles.
And just how did this team come together?
I've always loved Gabby's game, and I thought, oh, I could play well with Gabby. And so I texted her.
A championship team that began with a text. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
That is Global National for this Monday, September 11th. 22 years ago on this day, only one story was making headlines: the worst terror attacks to ever take place on U.S. soil. We leave you with tributes in New York City. The bell of hope is rung every September 11th, symbolizing the triumph of hope over tragedy. And the names of the nearly 3,000 people who died are read out by relatives, a ritual that has been repeated for more than 2 decades. Thanks for watching.